Hi students, we are still in our unit on social stratification, so we're talking about inequality at the macro scale in our society, and we're also going to talk about the micro scale life experiences that people have based on the degrees of inequality that we have. So in the previous week, you took some notes about classic theories of social stratification, you learned about the different socioeconomic categories of people who exist in the United States. But we haven't really talked about the differences necessarily in lifestyle. We talked about differences in life chances between some different people on that macro scale spectrum, that ladder that we've drawn. In this particular week, you're going to need to build on that knowledge from the first few lessons where we talked about social stratification, and make sure that you have really good notes before you begin taking notes on this week's stuff. Make sure you have really good notes from last week, organized really, really well, so that you can see the flow from life chances, that conversation when we first learned about that expanded definition that you need to know for the purposes of this class. It's a more detailed definition than your textbook includes, so make sure if you haven't watched that video from last week, go back and do it now, get that expanded definition, because we're going to talk about poverty for the first couple of lessons this week and then move from a United States focus into a global focus as we transition into chapter 8, which is on global stratification from chapter 7 to chapter 8. But we're going to talk about poverty and how it affects what's called human development issues, and also the fact that sociologists, we cannot simply give you a definition for the word poverty. Now, you will find a definition for the word poverty if you look it up in Merriam-Webster Dictionary or dictionary.com or whatever those resources are that you use to find the meaning of words. But in sociology, we have to have an adjective in front of the word poverty in order to know what we are talking about, because we're interested in life experience, life conditions that are caused by the macro scale existence of poverty in a society. So, in the USA, so in other words, that's why I have this written on the board behind me. We can't, in sociology, maybe you need to write a little bit more details in your notes. In sociology, we can't just say, oh, poverty means blah, because it doesn't. We have to look at different conditions surrounding poverty in order to define it, and that requires sticking an adjective in front of the word poverty. So the first thing we're going to talk about is poverty in the United States. And we, government-wise, on the macro scale, the federal government defines not poverty, but the official poverty line. And this is not a set number that you will find published, but instead it is a dollar amount that you can calculate based on the different place that you live. And this dollar amount that they calculate is only used to determine what would the subsistence level be to live in that particular place in that particular time. So here, to understand the official poverty line, here's where we have to go back to that definition of life chances, where we expanded the definition and made it more thorough together in class. Remember, we said that life chances are opportunities we have in life for two different types of things. One is subsistence level needs, and the second is comfort and advancement opportunities. Well, the first one, subsistence level, only includes 4 things. We certainly need air to breathe. We need water that doesn't make us sick or kill us. We need food, and we need shelter. Those are the only 4 things that are required for a subsistence level. So this official poverty line that is calculated using a formula that would make your algebra teacher blush, this official amount does not include your telephone. It does not include TV or Netflix. It does not include even electricity, really. It includes subsistence level, which is food, water, shelter. It doesn't say that you have to be able to have running water inside your shelter. It just says you need water. It doesn't say you have to have electricity inside your shelter or heat in the wintertime or conditioning in the summertime, air conditioning in the summertime. It just says shelter. So this is a different amount every different place that you go. If you're in Jackson Hole, Wyoming, or Jackson, Mississippi, the cost of living, let me write that term down, the cost of living is different because meat, butter, eggs, milk, bread is going to have a particular price on it in the Super Walmart in Jackson, Mississippi, and a different price on it at the Super Walmart in Jackson Hole, Wyoming. So there are different prices for food, for instance. There's different prices for water resources. I lived in Alabama for a little while after I had lived in Mississippi for a long while, and my water bill for my house every month in Mississippi was only like $25 a month. I didn't realize how spoiled I was until I moved to South Alabama in the Mobile area, and my water bill, it didn't just double, it tripled. I was between $75 and $100 a month with water because of the different cost that it took down there to produce the water that was clean enough for human consumption. So those kinds of things affect a cost of living. How much is a 2-bedroom apartment in Benton, Arkansas compared to Forest City, Arkansas, for instance? There's a different cost for those subsistence level things. And that's what the official poverty line is based on. Your cost of living and also the assumed average standard of living. The average standard of living. So, if a mobile home is sufficient shelter based on the average assumption for what people have, their living conditions, if a duplex is within that standard, that assumed level of resources for your living conditions, if a condominium is acceptable, then this goes into the cost of living in the area. The cost of living usually doesn't include how much it would take for you to use your van as shelter to live in. It wouldn't include that kind of cost because that's not an expected or in the average standard of living. The average standard of living in the United States is some sort of permanent shelter, not a tent in the forest. Now, a tent in the forest might work great. Some of you might think I wouldn't mind that, but that's not the assumption about the level of resources that people in the United States have. We have an assumption that if somebody has an apartment, the electricity service is hooked up in that apartment and they're able to maintain it. We make an assumption that they have water resources when they turn on their kitchen sink or their bathroom sink or when they flush their toilet, that waste is taken away and clean, drinkable water comes out. And so these are some assumptions about the standard of living, the level of comfort that you can expect based on a subsistence level plus in the United States. But the subsistence level costs a different amount from one place to the next, and the official poverty line is calculated for each of those places based on a complicated formula. And typically, the assumption is that it's a family of 4. So typically, we assume that within the household, there are 4 people who are benefiting from that rent payment or that mortgage payment or that housing voucher or whatever kind of resource you're using for your monthly housing, for instance. Or it's also the assumption, like if you need a WIC card in order to buy food supplies for the household, then it's for 4 typically is the assumed number for the cost of living and for subsistence level in an area. So in the next video that we have, we are going to look at not just the official poverty line, which varies from place to place, but we're going to put adjectives in front of the word poverty and look at how vastly different life in the U.S. can be based on the type poverty that is prevalent in the United States compared to the type poverty that you will find so often in other parts of the world. And we're going to apply life chances to that. I'm also going to take you through through a couple of documentaries that show examples of the type of poverty that is most common in the United States, but also the type of poverty that you will very commonly find in what am I trying to say? In countries around the world that have lesser degrees of development and industrialization and urbanization than the United States has. So that's what we'll look at for the rest of this week, and make sure you take great notes because Project 3 is going to rely on your really good notes from last week and this week about life chances, about poverty, about issues of global human development that we're going to finish up this week talking about. Text me with questions. See you soon.